Welcome to Modern Marketing Messages, the leading podcast discussing the latest and greatest in both online and offline marketing tactics, strategies, and trends. I'm Mariah Kalaji, and today we're discussing 2021 content marketing trends with AmericanEagle.com's VP of Strategic Initiatives, Tim Ahlenius. Welcome.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Yay, we're excited to have you. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Tim Ahlenius, VP Strategic Initiatives at AmericanEagle.com. I have been with the company going on 12 years now and in the industry for over 2 decades, which is a fun number to start saying. Yeah. It's exciting to see all the changes that have happened there. Do a lot of work with enterprise client accounts, strategic sales support, and any other strategic initiatives that come up with new services, and excited to talk about content today.
Yeah, you're the strategy guru. We're excited. So let's dive right in. So, content trends this year have really evolved given 2021 and our past in 2020. So video content is very, very hot right now. What type of trends are you seeing in the marketplace with clients and customers and people you're meeting with?
Video is a great medium. It is definitely extremely accessible now because of everyone having a high quality camera in their pocket. Basically, the just mobile devices of today have really brought that to a new level. Mm-hmm. And it's also, we're at a point now where you don't have to have a professional level video to show your product off, your service off, or whatever your content material is about. It works for you. And I'd say the biggest one is the short form video. Yes. TikTok is one of the biggest channel uprisings, huge. I would say, huge. And I got lost in it the other day, and I was just like, okay, this is just, it's fun, it's short, and it really just maintains your engagement in a good or a bad way. And I think what's really interesting is the number of businesses who have been jumping on the social media channels like TikTok, like Snapchat even, or Instagram, and actually succeeding with it. Yeah. It's not for everyone, don't get me wrong, but it is for certain industries appropriate. How do you take advantage of that? And I think that's just something that we continue to explore with our clients.
Absolutely. And, I saw an interesting statistic. According to the Social Media Today, Facebook live viewings actually increased by 50%, and Instagram saw a 70% increase in live videos. Now, that's something a little bit different than a pre-recorded video, but that live content really can engage with their audience then and there and respond to comments and such. Are you seeing that in the
absolutely.
market?
Absolutely. The biggest thing that I think that drove that live video feed is it was even pre-COVID last year, right? It was the trend that a lot of people were going to of sharing something live. But I think COVID and the shift, especially in the business world, with regards to the conferences that had to move virtual, it became so much more important. How do you reach your audience and reach them not just with a pre-recorded video that they could watch at any time, but something that they have to tune into? Yeah. It almost became a bit more like the programmed media back in the day when I grew up, where Saturday morning cartoons were only on Saturday. I couldn't go into Hulu or Netflix or Amazon Prime or Disney Plus like my kids do today and just pick a time to watch exactly what they want to watch and skip through to what they want to watch. I had to sit and wake up and have my Cheerios in the morning watch my Looney Tunes. And that just really is interesting to see that live broadcast is coming back through these additional channels. And I think it's a great thing because it really captures people's attention. You know who you're really reaching at that time. And it is fun and different because you can't go back and edit it. And I think that's where a lot of industries have looked at both edited photography and edited video as being too professional, too perfect. Yeah. And a big shift, and Dove has done this, especially with their marketing campaigns, of the reality of today versus the perfect looking ad. And I think that's just where live video brings that right back into the heart of it.
Absolutely. And you kind of touched on this, is really kind of showing that personal, that humanization across social media and your brand. And, that kind of lends into more interactive content because your audience can then engage with that a little bit more and relate to it. kind of on that trend of more interactive content, being able, that AR, that digital engagement, more motion graphics to actually showcase your products in a live format in that human interaction, I think is, huge. And being able to actually see, a piece of footwear on and walking, what are your thoughts on that interactive content?
Interactive content, especially augmented reality, AR, is huge. I mean, just what we're looking at for the mobile market size of that for 2021 is $8.9 billion in US dollars. It's amazing. And then the number of active users for 2021 is around 810 million. I'm grabbing all these stats from Statista.com just as a reference point for where those are coming from for everyone listening. What I think is a big shift, though, is there was a big push for augmented reality glasses originally, and that just hasn't taken off like I think people thought. There's virtual reality, and that's completely different. The Oculus of the world and some of the other tools that are out there for you to engage with virtual reality. But the augmented reality and using that, especially with what Apple did with the iPhone, bringing that augmented reality into your pocket, onto your tablet, is incredible. And the fact that my wife and I are shopping for a sofa the other day, I can actually place that sofa in the room at scale through my tablet and we can both see it. It's just a game changer for the way that you can shop for different types of items. There's another one, Apple themselves on their site place a monitor on your desktop and you can kind of see it in your workspace. And a great partner of ours, 3Kit, has an incredible solution for that interactive visual elements of what you can create and do, and it's so powerful for the experience that you can deliver.
Huge.
And that immersion that you get into the reality of that world, it's augmenting in a product. Even if you take it to the B2B side, right? That's B2C. B2C is always going to be ahead of B2B in the trends of technology. However, I feel that B2B is catching up a lot faster than they used to. With that, imagine that you are a HVAC repair person and you go in and you can actually pull out your tablet or your phone and you can have the schematic diagram of the board come up and you can see the different parts. You can tap on the one that's faulty and reorder it right there from that experience. That'd be huge. And that just gives you such a different level of engagement across both B2C and B2B markets.
Absolutely. Well, and I know, when you're able to highlight something and, put it into your space, your returns are down. You don't have to worry about, the sizing or the spacing. You really get a feel for it. And that is definitely the interactive content that we're seeing. And, also across social media, the interactive content and being able to shoppable videos when you're seeing a video and you can go right there and shop for that outfit or shop for that piece of wall art that they're highlighting. That is super engaging to audiences as well.
Absolutely. And again, that just comes back to give the user what they want to experience, and people are getting used to the ability to have technology aid them in these ways. And the shopping side of it is key. Even when Pinterest and Instagram added the shoppable tags that you could have inside of the apps, businesses saw an uptick because that's where they were reaching their consumer in an app that they spend so much of their day.
Absolutely.
And when they're in there, why not make it shoppable for them? Video games are exploring this now, which is crazy to me.
So wild.
To think that inside of a video game, I could potentially see like a couch and I can maybe tap on that couch and it opens up an offer to, hey, would you like to buy this couch? And it's kind of different to think about. And I'm not a big gamer myself, but I'm like, well, that's reaching people where they're at.
Absolutely.
And so how do we continue to find those ways to build those experiences?
Absolutely. And finding those channels to sell more as well. That kind of lends into, gaming, the influencers. I think that this year, influencers really drove kind of the customer reviews, drove customer buying habits, and, leveraging influencer content in 2021 is so key. And I think that, there's an interesting shift between the large scale celebrity influencers to kind of that micro and nano influencer, for those influencers that, have less than 25,000 followers, and being able to relate those influencers to your audience, I think is super important, and focusing on, that brand messaging, that creative content that those influencers can bring to your brand.
Absolutely. Influences are unique opportunity, and again, appropriate for certain types of businesses. Not every business can have an influencer out there. I mean, I can't think of, I mean, you could maybe have a plumber who is an influencer out there, but a lot of that's more testimonial based. But for the influencers that are out there, I think what's interesting is the amount of marketers that were going to increase their influence marketing budget back in 2019 was upwards of 40%. And to me, that's just incredible, because that was really an opportunity for brands to find someone to promote for them. And it wasn't the cost of a celebrity, right? It depends, again, on the level of influencer, and then there's a cost associated. But those influencers have their networks. Those networks have their opportunity to, continue purchasing from you. But at the same time, a lot of people don't talk about what is the lifetime value of an influencer. There's customer lifetime value that's talked about as a metric, but has anyone really been exploring how long an influencer will actually bring you a return on investment?
Absolutely.
And I think that's one area that needs to be explored more, because an influencer will have their network. Their network can still grow, but they're going to hit a plateau at some point. And you're also going to saturate the market with your branding through them at a point. So what is that typical lifespan for an influencer to be impactful for your market? And I think that's just where you need to really look at the impact metrics of what's happening there.
Well, and, be aware of what social platforms they're on, the engagements. I think, with Instagram's algorithm changing and the level of engagement there, varying so drastically over the past couple months, leveraging those influencers in a way that they don't get stale and, they can be your advocate. So I think it's an interesting, not only leveraging influencer marketing, but kind of viewing it almost as a partnership with a brand and developing, more of a long-term strategy, whether it does go stale, or a long-term strategy to keep it fresh. I think that is definitely something in 2021 where, that influencer content, maybe it's not one post, maybe it's you contract and create a partnership over the course of several months to create, a more of a partnership-like feel for your audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's where new products are released, and that's where an influencer can have a longer or a new life cycle begin. But it's also understanding with a campaign, it's kind of like just regular marketing campaigns. How long does it last before you need to actually switch it up? And how do you change that? And should you bring other influencers in as a differentiator too? Or look at your expansion of market, right? Is your influencer really geographically based? Look at all of those different analytics of influence from them, to use the same word. But where does their influence end? Where does it tailor off? Find a new influencer in that area.
Absolutely.
And also generational.
Huge.
I mean, I am not an influencer follower, okay?
Oh, yes.
My influencers are not influencers. They're like mentors, so I wouldn't even call them influencers because they're not on social media doing all this, right? But there's an aspect to generational, what's happening between the generations, to then say, hey, this influencer impacts this generation. Great, that's one of my target audiences. Who's your secondary audience? Who are their influencers? How do you reach them through those people? I think that's a critical thing to just explore and unpack as an organization.
Absolutely. And I think, influencers is such a buzzword, and it has been. And, kind of touching on demographics, having those user-generated content, that review stuff. So maybe it's not a specific influencer, but maybe it's a mom in a community that is, touting your brand or sharing it with their circle and their network, and being able to leverage those, user reviews and using them as your advocate, I think is another take that, maybe is a little bit differentiating from that influencer. But now that everyone's on social media, being able to leverage other people's posts if they're tagging you in it, encouraging that social connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And just continuing to find that. And also, influencers don't have to be people.
Exactly. Pupfluencing.
Pupfluencing. I know you're familiar with that.
Oh, yes. Pupfluencing, is unreal. I joked when I first got my dog that I wasn't going to become a pupfluencer for my dog. But after a while, I had to. But it's wild to see, some of these dogs have hundreds of thousands of followers. And, of course, I'm a sucker. I always joke that I love a good targeted ad. Appreciate the marketing when it's due.
Yep.
But pupfluencing is just a crazy booming, industry, for not only dog stuff, but like for dog mom apparel. And it's wild,
It is. And I think that's also where you just have to look at the size of that market too, right?
Huge.
So, I mean, the pet market itself and what you can do for the pet industry. I mean, back in 2019, 95 billion was spent on pets.
Well, and
it's amazing.
And think about all of the COVID puppies that, people got rescued, and, sharing their journeys and their user experiences through, pet products and just that sense of community. I think, even beyond pets, creating that community of your customers, your user base, where they can, ask questions and engage with whether it's a product, an experience, or what have you. I think creating that community is something that's really great across social.
Oh, absolutely. And you kind of bring that back to like the videos and what we were talking about at the beginning. Just the videos in short form there are huge because there's so many. I mean, who doesn't want to watch the Grumpy Cat videos? I know I'm dating myself with that statement, but there's others as well that people are, and TikTok is another example of where people are posting those and having that opportunity to reach more people. I think that's just such an interesting way that you don't have to have an influencer who's a person. You could create an influencer for your brand. And a lot of times people call these mascots and brand characters in the past. But how do you bring to life your brand in these channels? How do you give it its voice?
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of the big brands know and have, right? And a mascot's not always appropriate for every single organization, but there's different ways that you can reach your different audiences. And that's what you need to explore. And you need to just unpack, hey, yes, my primary audience is this audience. Maybe it's millennials. Maybe it's Gen Xers. Maybe it's the new Gen Z. I mean, it's, I see every generation and all the different clients we work with, and it's so critical to not just plan for your primary audience, but your secondary and your tertiary as well.
Absolutely. Well, and just understanding how these generations and generational gaps affect how these audience and consumers want to digest that content that you're sharing as a brand, as an organization, and being able to pivot across those channels to provide them the content that they want to receive on that platform.
Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of organizations don't realize the level of content creation that comes into play here. And then after that, content curation. I curate that content appropriately by the generation and my audience that I'm targeting. And that audience, right, may still have multiple generations. Because if you're targeting a CMO or a CTO level person, you're going to have people in that role who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And you still have to get your content appropriately in the right channel to reach each one of those, even though they're all in the same position.
Yeah.
And the way that they make decisions, the way that they research, all differ. And how do you make sure that you're reaching them appropriately? But also understanding the balance of how many you have coming to you typically from each of those. Again, bringing it back to data, there's so much that you can do with that for marketing.
Huge.
And you just, I mean, marketing, yes, there's a huge creative aspect to it. We've talked about the influencers and campaigns and creative immersive content and interactive content experiences. But at the end of the day, if we can't measure who we're trying to reach and how effective that reach is,
what's the point?
What's the point?
It's huge. I feel like a lot of times, people think that they just need a social presence, and maybe there's not a necessarily thought out plan of attack on how you want to reach that audience across these platforms and such. And having data to back your audience demographic, to back the content that you're creating is so important, and being able to really analyze that data to make sure you're making an impact, and then to pivot as you need to.
Absolutely. And pivoting is huge because in today's world, with the right data measurement in place, relatively quickly how well your campaign's doing, how well your reach is reaching. And if you don't look at that data and you just let it go, you might be wasting effort in a paid campaign or a paid influencer. And so it's so critical to have those points of check-in on a more regular basis. And there's a lot of tools that also flag it for you. Anyways, we're going to go in and use artificial intelligence to really help trigger those alerts to us based off of information that's coming through. And we want to just continue to explore that with an organization and their marketing efforts, because at the end of the day, your marketing is going to be on not only multiple channels that's visual, but there's also a bunch of the technical or just behind the scenes marketing efforts that happen. And that's with your search engine optimization. That's with just different methods that you put into place to understand how your campaigns interrelate with each other. Link building. We talked about some of the blogger moms before. It's just how do you bring those influencers? How do you bring those affiliates in who are referral traffic is huge. And you have to do that in your marketing today.
Yeah, it has to be integrated across all channels, across all platforms with a similar brand voice that speaks to those demographics. I think that you hit the nail on the head right there. Absolutely. Well, I think, our word of the day was huge. Content is huge in 2021, and being able to really leverage that engaging content, that social content, and that immersive content so your customer feels something. I think that being able to provide a feeling to that customer, that's what's going to really help that audience engage with you more.
Absolutely. And we have a problem of today, right? There's a content saturation problem. And I'll give a shout out to Wolfgang, one of our senior content strategists here. But that content saturation is where we now have to pivot, and we have to now focus the content on where it needs to go.
Yep.
And to me, that is huge, because there's still so much that can be done with content, even though there's such a huge amount of content out there. And how do you sift through it all? And how do you ensure that your end user is finding what they need to find? And to me, that is where the content strategy programs that we put together here for our clients are not just focused on the written content of the page of a website or in an app, but it focuses on all the different channels that you need to be involved with, all the different audiences that you need to be targeting in order to ensure that that reach is happening correctly. And that voice, that generational aspect that we've talked about, it has to be discussed, because if you don't write it the right way, I'm going to have a Gen Xer who's going to say this emoji means this, and I'm going to have a millennial who says, nope, it means this. We talked about that earlier this morning.
Right?
It's just crazy.
I feel like I date myself as a millennial because I'm the queen of the crying face emoji, but I guess now it's the skull.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting news to me, because that's not mine was, I knew it was the laughing crying face. My mom thought it meant that they were just crying and sad. And so I would get that emoji and I'm like, what? No, that's not correct. And you want to hear a great talk about the difference of generations. Jason Dorsey